Greetings sailors and welcome back to World of Warships and my very first Zao game that I've ever covered on the channel. It's not one of mine, I don't have it yet, but somehow I've managed to go all of these years without ever featuring this particular ship. Now, a lot of the older players, or the players that have been around since Alpha and Closed Beta, still call this ship the Senjo. But I've always known it as the Zao, so that's how I think of it. And once upon a time, this thing was not something you really wanted to see if you were in a battleship at tiers 8, 9 and 10, because it was a stealth-firing monster. Now, those days are gone. Along with destroyers losing their ability to stealth fire, so did this thing. And this was really what made this ship so powerful, was that ability to just keep pelting you from range over and over, but stay invisible. And there was nothing you could do about it, because it's fast enough that it could outpace all of the battleships that it could meet. So meeting this was a real pain in the backside. And I think you just don't see as many of them these days. I mean, they're not a completely uncommon sight, but in terms of what it can now do, which is, you know, it still specialises in setting battleships and other ships on fire, and AKit here will mostly be using HE for the majority of this replay. He has very little AP damage in this at all. The Henri IV, the French tier 10 cruiser, is also very, very good at that, and actually has better HE shells in that they have a higher base fire chance. So the Zao isn't that special anymore, but it's still got decent armour. It's got the second best concealment. The Minotaur rather usurped that when it came along, but of course the Minotaur does not get HE shells to work with, and it's only got 6-inch guns. Well, I say only, they're still pretty damn dangerous guns. It doesn't have the best AP, I mean, it doesn't have the best AA, it doesn't have the best anything apart from its rudder response. And that rudder response, the rudder shift time, is actually still, you know, something that's very, very useful, because even though you're now going to be spotted for as long as you're in fire range, unless you're doing this and using terrain as cover, the ability to react to incoming shots is going to be very, very useful, because I think fundamentally how you play as Zao hasn't really changed. And bear in mind, I'm talking about this from the experience of well, watching this replay, watching one or two other replays on YouTube, watching people streaming, and just being on the wrong end of Zaos now and in the past. You basically want to kite people to dodge the fire and set fires yourself, and there's not that much more to it. It's got decent armor, but it's not really something you see people brawling with a lot. It's got the longest range torpedoes, but they're also very easy to spot torpedoes. Although, having said that, you know, if you land torpedo hits, they're what, 21,000 plus damage, so I think they are the most effective torpedoes in terms of damage at tier 10 on a cruiser, but they get spotted from nearly 2 kilometers away, so yeah, good luck using those reliably. So most Zaos will do what AKit's going to do and try and keep their distance and just fire a lot of HE. So it's not as special as it once was, definitely not, and I definitely see less of them around these days, but AKit is going to show us that it's still entirely possible to do well in a Zao. If you recognise that name, by the way, well, he's on the Asian server, and I point that out because the score screens at the end will definitely make it clear that he's on the Asian server, or at least using the client with... I'm going to admit I'm not even sure what language it is. Could be Korean, could be Japanese. I have no idea. But anyway, somebody will facepalm and go, Jedi, you noob, obviously it's X, and, you know, then I'll be the wiser. But yeah, I've actually had him on the channel before, twice before, so he's one of those people that, you know, it's not a thing I do very often, is feature multiple replays from people, but the first one was in 2015, the last one, the next one was in 2016, and now he's got one in 2017, so he's been watching the channel for a while. It's more just that he has been watching the channel for a while, and also this is one of only, I think, 3 or 4 Zao replays that I've ever been sent, and somehow I just never got round to showing any of the others, and maybe they weren't that interesting to me at the time, or there were other reasons. I just had more interesting replays, and to be honest, I don't think this is going to be the most thrilling replay. It's more just that I saw it there in the inbox. It's a relatively recent game, and also I've never shown a Zao game before, so I thought it's about time. So he's currently exchanging HE with this Moskva, although the Moskva has just died. AKit himself has taken some hits, but he's been angling even reasonably well so far. So he's not taken a huge amount of damage in terms of heavy damage or citadel damage. So a lot of this he will be able to heal back. He's also going to be fairly exclusively firing HE, as I think one probably does in a Zao. I mean, the AP is pretty good. It doesn't have... it's not a terrible velocity, actually. It's okay as far as 8-inch AP goes. It's not as fast as the Moskva's guns, although that's not 8-inch AP by any means. But yeah, it's all round okay. It's got a pretty good fire chance, and I'm assuming he's using Demo Expert and probably some flags to boost that fire chance. So it's almost certainly over 20%. But I mean, the Henri Quatre can get to over 25% if you're doing the same thing. So it's not quite maybe as effective as the Henri Quatre at setting fires, but it's still pretty effective, and it's also got a pretty good rate of fire. So something like the Des Moines I would be worried about getting close up to in terms of its guns, or the Minotaur I'd be more worried about getting close up to, depending on what I'm in myself. But the Zao at longer ranges has that capacity to just be annoying all game long, and the Henri Quatre does as well. But we're talking about the Zao, so I don't know, I keep bringing that up. The Henri Quatre just, it has a lot of the same flavour in terms of, I think, how you want to play the Henri Quatre is to rain down that HE from longer distances, to rack up that fire damage. Now, having said racking up that fire damage, more than half of his damage done is still going to be from HE. Just from the HE damage. He'll have very little AP in this, in terms of the damage done. He does fire a couple of salvos later on, which we'll obviously get to, but the vast majority is going to be from HE, and a fair proportion from fires as well. And as you can see, he's got some nice fires going on that Yamato. Now, he did have the distraction. Ouch, yeah, there we go. That was at least, what, 1 or 2 penetrations? I'm not sure that was a citadel. I don't know if that was enough damage to be a citadel, but that was fairly painful anyway. So yeah, he had the Megami to provide a distraction for that Yamato, but the Megami was rather too close to survive that engagement, so now people are turning their guns on him. However, having said that, they do seem to have switched their attention to this Fletcher, who's clearly been picked up by well, one of those cruisers. My guess would be the Henri Quatre. It's maybe got hydro and has gotten close enough to chase the Fletcher out of smoke. So he's got this window. AKit's got this window to now just sit here and try and burn down this Yamato. And battleships, I think, are still the prime targets of this. He has, of course, taken down the Moskva as well, but this is the point where we could maybe make a joke about, well, you know, the Moskva is the tier 10 Soviet battleship, clearly. It's such a silly ship, that. I'm actually on the way to the Moskva on the NA server. It was, what, yesterday, the day before? I finally got through the Chapayev, which wasn't a bad grind. I actually found that a reasonably nice ship to play, and bought myself a Dmitry Donskoy. And it used up most of the credits I've got on the NA server, because I don't play on NA nearly so much. But having said what I said about it takes me a while to get to tier 10s. At least I think I said that. I've done a couple of takes of this by now. There's always that issue of, did I say it on this take? Did I say it on a previous take? Anyway, yeah, getting to tier 10 can take me a while, but as I've been concentrating on more or less the one line on NA, it's gone a lot quicker for me. Whereas on EU, you know, I don't have a Zao, I'm only at the Megami. On the American cruisers, I'm only at the New Orleans. I only, not that long ago, got the Fat Freddy, the Friedrich de Grosser. So, yeah, even with the lines that I enjoy playing, or I don't even know where I'm going with that sentence. Even with the lines I enjoy playing, like the Germans, the German battleships, yeah, it takes me a really long time. So, yeah, I don't know. I think with EU, I just spread myself around a lot more, and then with NA, I've just concentrated a lot more, focused on the one line, and I've gotten there a lot quicker. Now, as to what AKit's doing there, by the way, I'm pretty sure, and he doesn't really say in the email, because he did have a couple of notes, including noting or admitting a mistake that you will see him make later on. But I think he was just checking the movement of the Yamato and seeing that the Yamato's reversing using the torpedo indicator, which even if you never use your torpedoes in a battle, it's still useful to be able to check whether someone's going forwards or backwards. You know, that's one of the nice perks of the Scharnhorst, the Gneisenau, and the Tirpitz, is that you can do that even if you never get close enough. Don't forget that you've got those torpedoes and that lead indicator. That can be very, very useful. So that's the Yamato finished off. They've actually, at this point, largely thanks to the Khabarovsk, they've gotten all 3 cap points. But they've also been forced away from those 3 cap points. So, long term, this is not viable, but at the moment, it's not a terrible position. The onus is on the enemy team. The enemy team have to cap to bring this back, which basically leaves them stuck in the middle. And they're receiving more fire from this side, obviously, with the Montana, the Yamagi, and the AKit. But the Khabarovsk is running around on the north side and trying to cause them problems from that side as well. We're over at this point, by the way, 200,000 damage, which was an odd way to structure that sentence, I realise in retrospect. Just as it came out, yeah, I thought, yeah, that's not good grammar particularly. But you don't come to this channel for good grammar. You definitely don't come to this channel for good grammar. So, of the remaining enemy targets, I mean, the 2 battleships are probably his priority. This is a little risky here, turning like this when he knows there was someone focusing on him, but fortunately they've gone round to another target, at least temporarily. But possibly it's that Montana, yeah, there we go, who was looking in his direction when he was spotted and briefly was pointing his mouse somewhere else so that it wasn't on him for a second. That was an awfully long-winded sentence. I don't know. I'm doing well today. But of those 2, I mean, the lower health Izumo, obviously much more handy, much more of a high priority as a target. Where did handy come from? I really am doing well today. So that whittles the enemy team down by 1 more ship. They do still have a fairly healthy points lead, but the enemy team is in the process of capping now the 2 remaining cap points that they don't already have. So they've got to basically clinch the deal by killing these ships, because they can't particularly rely on the points advantage. They can't sail to the edges of the map and stay there and just win on points, because we're down to around 5 minutes now, and that's just not going to work. The enemy team will win. Well, they probably will win with all 3 cap points. I think they could close that gap in 5 minutes if for some reason the entirety of AKit's team just decided to, you know, sail along the map border and nobody fired at each other, which is a very unlikely scenario, I realise, but just, you know. Anyway. So we've got the Rune in A, we've got the remaining Montana, the remaining battleship in B, and then the Megami was last along around C somewhere. So they're not really in a position to support each other. And it's right about now that AKit, well, I think he was hoping for a broadside shot, but as the Rune got spotted, he was already turning, so it's back onto the HE. And that gives him not 1 but 2 cap defences, which is going to be nice for his XP, but didn't really do any damage. And much like World of Tanks, you don't actually have to do damage to get a cap reset. Even a shattered shell or a 0 damage pen will get you the resets. So sometimes just the act of firing, even if you don't do any damage, is useful. So that's a fire going on the rune. The Habarovsk, meanwhile, is moving around from the north, looking to use this distraction, because the rune's obviously got his attention focused on AKit. And this is actually, for a destroyer, this is a really good situation to use somebody else's distraction. And I more often than not find myself in this position when I'm playing my Japanese destroyers, but a lot of the time the temptation is just to stay stealthed up and to try and position yourself for a torpedo drop. But quite often you can actually get in free shots. Now, it obviously depends on whether then any of the ships within range decide to focus you, but oftentimes just being able to do that little bit of extra damage, even if it's only a little bit of damage, but you set a fire, for instance, that can be really useful. So that was one of the moments, well, probably the only moment where you could genuinely say AKit made a mistake. He gave way too much broadside to that rune and got spanked reasonably hard. And he doesn't have a lot of heals left at this point. In fact, he's cooling down to his last heal. But the rune is out of the way. They do still have possession of A because the rune was never able to cap it. And they just have to hang on, basically. So that Montana's hoving into view. The Habarovsk is coming back round but not able to immediately assist him. And this Montana, it more looks like he's trying to get out of the line of fire of their own Montana, who is actually reasonably low health. If it was me, I might have tried to take out that Montana. And he actually does take out that Montana, but I don't know. I maybe would have positioned myself in a slightly different way. But on the other hand, maybe this guy's positioning is actually better than I imagined, because he's been able to take out that one Montana and he's now in a position to shoot at AKit. So maybe I'm talking complete nonsense. It's entirely possible. So as the Montana's bringing his turrets round, he's probably got the concealment module, might even have concealment expert on his captain, so he can see AKit, but AKit can't see him until he fires. This is one of the benefits of the American battleships, is they can be very stealthy. You can get them down to, well, I'm not sure what the Montana would have, but you can get the North Carolina down to, is it 12 point something kilometers? Anyway, so unfortunately, you know, it looks like that salvo is going to miss, but unfortunately, one just catches him in what looks awfully like a Citadel shot, and that came very close to being the end of the game for AKit, because if one more shell had clipped him, even an overpen, well, actually no, would an overpen have? No, I think an overpen would have had enough damage from the Montana's guns to end him. I'm not 100% certain, but either way, it wouldn't have taken much more to kill him. However, that Montana is done for. AKit is still alive, albeit on very low health, and that just leaves the Mogami. Now, they're far enough ahead that even if they can't kill the Mogami, the game finishes in less than a minute anyway, so they will just win on points. But as it is, I think it's the Amagi that gets the Mogami, and they win. So that was a Witherer, I believe, Dreadnought, Confederate, the Kraken, the one you get for setting lots of fires, which I can't remember the name of, and a High Caliber with, well, quite a lot of damage done. It was a lot of damage. It was 200 and something, and it's not the highest damage game I've seen in the ZAL by any means, or even a tier 10 cruiser, but 282, there we go. I had to rewind the timeline to look that up. 282,000 damage, you know, almost 300,000 damage. That's still quite a lot of damage. And having said it's not the highest damage I've seen, you know, there's not been that many higher than that. And for a cruiser, that's really impressive. So it was over 3,000 base XP, which was more than 1,000 than the next person got. And I think he probably quite comfortably did more damage, far more damage than anyone else on his team, although the Habarovsk had clearly been doing decently well as well, which you might have noted in the chat. As for the actual breakdown of the damage, it was 160k from the HE, and then 121 and a half, just about, from fires. So yeah, getting those fires is pretty critical, but even just the 160k from the HE alone would have been a pretty reasonable result, but then setting all those fires just turned it into a really good result. So yeah, the Zhao, it's still got it, but I think it's a little bit like the Shimakaze. There's an optimal way to play it, and if you play it any other way than that, it's going to severely diminish your chances of having a good result. And so that can make it kind of boring to play. And I find this personally with the Shimakaze, which I do have, that the Yugumo is a far more interesting ship to play than the Shimakaze, because the Yugumo just has more options, especially these days where you can substitute smoke for a torpedo boost. Whereas the Shimakaze, it's a one-trick pony. And I think the Zao is a bit of a one-trick pony as well, but if you can get it to work, it's a pretty good trick. So there we are for my first ever Zao replay in all the time I've been doing Warships replays. Somehow I got here in the end. If you enjoyed it, you can leave any comments below, you can hit the like button, you can sub to my channel if you haven't already, and as always, stay tuned for more.